Back here on CBS Sports HQ, if you go to cbssports.com, there's an article from our writer Tyler Sullivan ranking the 10 biggest wild cards that could shape this upcoming NFL season. We're going to count them down from 10 to 1. We have Tyler Sullivan joining us now, and Michael Penix is your number 10 wild card. Is he going to be more how he looked to the eye or more how he looked on paper? Because I feel like he looked better to the eye than he did on the stat sheet.
It's 100% true, because you look at the stats and you say, okay, he completed 58% of his passes last season. He had around a 78 passer rating. Like, that's not the quarterback that I remember. I remember someone who felt like a first-round pick, a top 10 pick at times for the Atlanta Falcons. And so, to me, that's the biggest question with Michael Penix. Is it what we saw with our eyes, or do those numbers tell a little bit more of the story? If it's what we saw and what we feel like he could be in that eye test, then the Atlanta Falcons are live in the NFC South. As much as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers feel like they have that division in a chokehold, if Michael Penix Jr. looks more like the quarterback that we saw last season, not necessarily the numbers, then all of a sudden the answers are solved in Atlanta. The skill positions are there. Drake London, Bijan Robinson, even Kyle Pitts, who's been making some noise yet again at camp. We'll see if we fall for it yet again. But Michael Penix is the question here in the entire division. If he is a first-round pick and a top 10 pick, then the Atlanta Falcons could be live for that division championship.
Yeah, Bucks the favorite about plus 110, and then it's the Falcons at plus 200 to win that division. Let's go to the Denver Broncos. Last year, Bo Nix, a really pleasant surprise, but now you would think a lot more pressure on him in year 2, and the defense, which was already great, seems to have gotten any better. So why is that Broncos offense your number 9 wild card?
Well, it's exactly what you just pointed to, right? That defense only got better, and they were a top 5 unit in the NFL a season ago. I feel like this could be the best defense in the NFL, and if you have the best defense in the NFL, you should be making deep playoff runs. Now, the only thing that could prevent them from doing so is a possible regression on the offensive side of the ball. Bo Nix was sensational last season, 29 passing touchdowns. They were 10-7, made the playoffs. This offseason, they've improved on that side of the ball. They brought in Evan Ingram as a much-needed addition at the tight end spot. I feel like they unlocked Marvin Mims Jr. down the stretch. He was on pace over those final 5 games to go over 1,000 yards if you project that over a season, and they revamped the backfield. So how does it all come together? How does Sean Payton take all of these new pieces along with the old ones and put it into a capable offense? If he does, then this team could do something special that not a lot of people see coming.
And Courtland Sutton yesterday, 4 years, $92 million extension at the wide receiver position. Speaking of wide receivers, your number 8 wild card is the wide receiver room in San Francisco. Now, without Debo, who they traded away, and Brandon Ayuk is still injured, when do you think that he might return from injury this season?
Well, that's another question, right? We have no idea. And it feels like even if he is healthy, the relationship doesn't feel all warm and fuzzy with the San Francisco 49ers. So we're kind of looking at Juwan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall as to maybe carrying the baton. Obviously, Debo Samuel is a significant hole to fill because he kind of fits so many different things. I feel like Christian McCaffrey is going to feel like he's more involved, even more so coming off the injury last season. You still have George Kittle. But to me, you look at this wide receiver room, if they are able to elevate, well, then I feel like this offense should be okay. I feel like the San Francisco 49ers are going to kind of go back to the team that we remember them as one of the elite teams in the conference. If they don't, you're talking about a lower ceiling on offense and in a division where you have the Los Angeles Rams, in a conference where it's the Philadelphia Eagles and Washington Commanders. They might be a little outgunned.
And even Juwan Jennings was banged up a little bit in practice this week. He's day-to-day with a calf injury. Let's go to number 7 in your top 10 wild cards for the upcoming season. And this one's pretty self-explanatory. It's J.J. McCarthy taking over for Sam Darnold in Minnesota.
Yep, and I have looked at the Minnesota Vikings as maybe the best team in the NFL equipped to bring in a quarterback like J.J. McCarthy because of all the weapons that they have, because of the defense, because of the offensive line, and Kevin O'Connell on the sideline. But at the end of the day, we don't know what J.J. McCarthy is going to look like when he's actually under center. You have to remember, the last time he played a meaningful football game was the national championship with the Michigan Wolverines, and he completed, I think, around 58 58% of his passes. He was 10 of 18 in that win. So it wasn't like it was an unbelievably efficient outing. And so we still need to see what J.J. McCarthy looks like. He projects like a first-round quarterback, like a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. But unlike Michael Penix, who we were talking about earlier, we haven't seen it with J.J. McCarthy. So I wonder if the Vikings, who won 14 games a season ago, maybe they take a little bit of a step back to take 2 steps forward in 2026.
Certainly has the talent around him to succeed. The Cowboys come in at number 6, and it's not anything specific about the Cowboys. It's everything about the Cowboys. Many seem to have kind of written them off as a serious contender this year. Why do you think they could be?
Well, that's exactly it, right? You have the Philadelphia Eagles, who won the Super Bowl, the Washington Commanders, who were the Cinderella in the NFC Championship a year ago. I feel like we're just looking at those two teams and kind of forgetting about the Dallas Cowboys. You have to remember, go back to 2023. Do you know who finished second in the NFL in MVP voting? It was Dak Prescott. It was the last time he was fully healthy. He was one of the best quarterbacks, one of the best players in the NFL. He's an automatic for 4,000 yards if he plays a full season. And so this team, the Dallas Cowboys, really it's all predicated on health. Is Dak Prescott able to stay healthy? Is that secondary with Trayvon Diggs able to stay healthy? If so, there's a lot to like. Yes, there's questions in the running game, but defensively, you have Micah Parsons. We'll see what happens with the contract. Trayvon Diggs, like I mentioned, the Dallas Cowboys have the pieces, have the talent in place. Now, let's see what Brian Schottenheimer does with it now. If he is able to put everything together, well, then the Dallas Cowboys could be fascinating in the NFC and kind of crash the party.
Other team in Texas, the Houston Texans, and they took a step back offensively last season. They were really bad on the offensive line, and they traded their best offensive lineman, Laramie Tunsil, to the Commanders. So why do you believe that O-line could potentially be better?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, right? Hassel, you have your worst season on the offensive line, and somehow you trade your best offensive tackle. I don't know how that's going to go, but this is the key crux for the Houston Texans, because I look at this roster and say you have one of the brightest young quarterbacks in C.J. Stroud. You have a top 10 defense in the NFL, certainly a top 10 secondary in the NFL, and you have really fascinating skill position players headlined by Nico Collins. The one thing that could prevent them from repeating as champions in the AFC South, pushing a little bit further into the postseason, is if C.J. Stroud is sacked 52 times again like he was last season. So it's an entirely reshaped left side of the offensive line. We'll see how it all pans out. But if they are able to protect C.J. Stroud, you are looking at a team that is loaded, young, and ready to emerge.
The only quarterback sacked more than Stroud last season was Caleb Williams of the Bears, but he's not your number 4 wild card. It's his first-year head coach, Ben Johnson.
It is, because I am a believer in the talent that the Chicago Bears brought in. I am really high on them in 2025 to make the playoffs. But my main concern is Ben Johnson. He was the most sought-after head coach this hiring cycle, and really over the last few years before he ultimately opted out of Detroit to go to Chicago. But we've seen this a couple of times over the course of NFL history, where this high prolific offensive mind was dominant as an offensive coordinator, and then he ascends to head coach and is not really up for the job. And so I don't know what's going to happen with Ben Johnson. I feel like he's going to be a good head coach. I feel like he's going to take this ascension in a more promising way and lead the Chicago Bears to the playoff berths, but I don't know that. I've seen guys, and you have it here. Adam Gase is a perfect example, where he was a good offensive coordinator, great offensive coordinator, not so great as a head coach. You look at Josh McDaniels, I can think of off the top of my head, in New England. Good offensive coordinator, bad head coach. So the book is still out with Ben Johnson, but overall, that's a big question. If he can't get the Chicago Bears team to really pull it all together with that talent that they have with Caleb Williams under center, it's going to be an uphill climb and a familiar place in the standings for Chicago Bears fans.
All right, we've reached the top 3 of your biggest wild cards for the upcoming season, and things that could really shape the upcoming season. And number 3 is perhaps the biggest individual wild card of all, Aaron Rodgers, both on and off the field.
there was absolutely no way that we could come up with a list of wild cards and not name Aaron Rodgers, right? He was the wild card of the offseason, and now we have to see what it looks like now that he's a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers and is going into what he alluded to, maybe his final season. I'm always a little bit weary when players are talking about retirement, almost feeling like they have one foot out the door. That doesn't necessarily translate to prolific play in what would be their final season. And my main concern with Aaron Rodgers is that he doesn't have his binky in Pittsburgh. And what I mean by that is anybody that used to play for the Green Bay Packers, we saw with the New York Jets that he really favored former Green Bay Packers, former players that he had a relationship with, whether it was Randall Cobb, whether it was Allen Lazard, and more recently Davante Adams, to the point where last year it felt like Garrett Wilson was being phased out of the New York Jets offense in favor of Davante Adams. Right now, he's looking at an offense with DK Metcalf, Jonnu Smith, Pat Freiermuth, all guys he does not have a prior relationship with. So how quickly can he build that chemistry? And if it's a little bit of a slow burn, that could really stall out this offense.
Your number 2 wild card for the upcoming season is the quarterback he's basically just switched places with this season. It's Justin Fields. And my question is, because it's Fields, a retread quarterback, because it's the Jets, who I don't think a lot of people expect that much from, why is this so high on your ranking?
Because I think we would have this same conversation a year ago when we were talking about the Minnesota Vikings and Sam Darnold, right? I wonder if Justin Fields could be the latest that falls in that line of first-round, highly touted quarterbacks that it just kind of took a little bit in the right situation to really have their careers take off. And I just love the roll of the dice here by the New York Jets. You're not really paying him too much from quarterback standards. 2 years, $40 million. If Justin Fields can finally kind of get situated in the NFL, we've seen him be prolific with his legs. The question's always been about the consistency throwing the football. He has a prior relationship with Garrett Wilson going back to their days at Ohio State. I really like Mason Taylor, their tight end out of LSU, their second-round pick. If all of a sudden those things go right, they have a defense that is a playoff caliber defense. So I look at this entire operation for the New York Jets. They could be a surprise team. I know that everybody in that division looks at the New England Patriots as a team that could rise above the rest. But if Justin Fields hits, and he is that next Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, it's the Jets that could be that team, believe it or not.
All right, Tyler, you ranked them, and we counted them down 10-1. What is your number 1 wild card that could shape the upcoming season?
It is without a doubt the Cincinnati Bengals defense. We've been clowning on them, or at least I have, all offseason because they seemingly are allergic to signing anybody that plays on the defensive side of the ball, whether it was Shamar Stewart, who eventually they signed to a deal with, or Trey Hendrickson, where that is still kind of just looming over the organization. We don't know how that's going to unfold, but he is a guy that had 17.5 sacks, led the NFL a season ago, and he's kind of drifting into the wind. We don't know what's going to happen here, and a lack of a defensive presence is what prevented them from getting into the playoffs a year ago. I think the way that offense was humming down the stretch, nobody wanted to play them if they were able to sneak in, but the reason why they were unable to is because of that defensive side of the ball. You look at those points per game in losses, 27.8. I mean, that's just abysmal when you talk about NFL history. But I will say this. What if it's not that bad? We're all doom and gloom right now with the Cincinnati Bengals, where they're just going to be a terrible defense. They're not going to be any good. It's going to be the same old story. But what if they're not? What if they're average? What if they're just slightly below average as opposed to god-awful that they were a year ago? That might be good enough because of this offense. And if that's good enough to get them into the playoffs, you have Joe Burrow, a top 5 quarterback in the NFL, Jamar Chase, a top 1 of 1 type of talent that's entered the NFL. So they could be dangerous if that defense is just slightly better. And
just a few years removed from seeing just that, with the Bengals getting so close to a Super Bowl championship. Tyler Sullivan ranking the top wild cards of the NFL season. We've got the season beginning on CBS and Paramount Plus September the 7th. So closing in on a month to the first NFL games of the year. This week, the first preseason game of the year, the Hall of Fame game, Chargers-Lions.